Hello everyone, welcome to Between the Lines, a podcast of verbal essays brought to you by Africa Advocacy Foundation. Here we delve into topics, issues and experiences of marginalized communities in order to empower, advocate and educate. As a forewarning, topics discussed here are not the opinions of individuals or the charity as a whole, but more so the exploration of the topic as it stands currently and historically. If at any point you feel triggered or uncomfortable with the subject matter at hand, please ensure you take care of yourself and reach out to us or any other supportive organisation or trusted individual. Today, we'll be delving into a topic that's critical yet often overlooked: the incarceration of Black men in the UK. This issue isn't just about crime and punishment. It's about systemic injustice, historical legacies, and the ways our society continues to fail communities of colour. If we're to build a fairer and more equitable society, it's a conversation that we must have. My goal today as your host is to raise awareness, educate and empower and advocate for change. So let's dive deep into the understanding of how and why the criminal justice system disproportionately affects Black men in Britain. To understand the present, we have to look at the past. The disproportionate incarceration of Black men in the UK isn't a new phenomenon. It has deep historical roots tied to the legacies of colonialism and the migration patterns that followed. After World War II, the UK called upon its former colonies to help rebuild the nation, leading to an influx of Black immigrants from the Caribbean and Africa. Instead of being welcomed as equal citizens, these communities faced systemic discrimination in housing, employment, and crucially, policing. In his seminal work, Policing the Crisis, Stuart Hall and his colleagues, 1978, detail how Black communities were often portrayed as a threat in the British media. This portrayal laid the groundwork for what we see today: a criminal justice system that continues to disproportionately target and criminalise Black men. Fast forward to recent years, and we see studies like the 2017 Lammy Review, revealing that Black men are more likely to be stopped, searched, charged and sentenced more harshly than their white counterparts. This isn't just a failing of the system. This is structural racism in action. Let's talk about policing. Policing in the UK has been long criticised for its discriminatory practice, particularly the use of stop and search tactics. Research shows that Black people are 9 times more likely to be stopped and searched than white people. These practices don't just create a sense of mistrust, they entrench a narrative that equates Blackness with criminality. Scholars like Williams and Clark, 2016, discuss how the narrative of gangs is often used to justify racial profiling and over-policing of Black communities. But it doesn't stop there. The criminal justice system's racial biases extend to the courtroom sentencing. The Joint Enterprise Law, for instance, is a perfect example. This law, which allows for people to be prosecuted for crimes committed by their associates, has been disproportionately applied to young Black men. As a result, we see them serving long sentences, not necessarily for crimes they committed, but for merely being associated with individuals involved in criminal activity. Another critical aspect we need to discuss is the school-to-prison pipeline. This is a process where disciplinary policies and practices in schools contribute to the criminalisation of young Black people, setting them up on a trajectory that leads to incarceration. Studies have shown that Black students in the UK are more likely to face exclusion from school for behaviours that, in other students, are often handled with a warning or a different form of discipline. This exclusion doesn't just affect academic performance. It places young people in environments where they're more likely to come into contact with the criminal justice system. Educational disparities are compounded by socio-economic factors, such as poverty and housing instability, which disproportionately affect Black families. The criminalisation of Black youth through harsh school policies, combined with over-policing in their communities, creates a perfect storm. This isn't just a pipeline. It's a highway from education to incarceration. When we talk about breaking this cycle, it's not just about reforming schools, but also addressing broader issues like poverty, mental health, and community investment. Socioeconomic factors also play a huge role in this crisis. When we talk about over-incarceration, we can't ignore the intersections of race and class. Many Black communities face higher rates of unemployment, poverty, and housing instability, all of which correlate strongly with higher rates of contact with the criminal justice system. Scholars like Waquan, 2009, and Alexander, 2010, argue that the criminal justice system often serves as a means of social control over marginalized communities. The austerity measures of the past decade have only exacerbated these issues. Cuts to social services, youth programs, and educational resources have left many communities vulnerable. In such environments, the line between poverty and criminality becomes blurred, not because of an inherent tendency to crime, but because of systematic neglect and disinvestment. The impact of this mass incarceration extends beyond the individuals in prison. It affects entire families and communities. When we incarcerate Black men at these disproportionate rates, we're also punishing their children, their partners, and their communities. Research by Condry and Minson 2020 highlights the ripple effect that incarceration has, particularly on children who grow up with a parent behind bars. This can lead to a cycle of trauma, economic deprivation, and further criminalization affecting multiple generations. Moreover, single-parent households, which are more common in communities affected by mass incarceration, often struggle with additional burdens, both emotionally and financially. It is critical to recognize that the trauma of imprisonment isn't just felt by the imprisoned. It's a shared pain that reverberates throughout the community. And let's not forget the mental health impacts of these injustices. The prison environment is already harsh, but for Black men who face racial discrimination, both outside and inside, it can be even more devastating. Research by Bowen and Goodman, 2018, shows that racial discrimination is directly linked to mental health issues among incarcerated Black men. Yet prisons are ill-equipped to provide the necessary support, particularly when it comes to culturally competent mental health care. This lack of support only further alienates Black men within the system, making rehabilitation more challenging and recidivism, I can never say that word, more likely, recidivism. This is another layer of systematic failure that we need to address urgently. But there's hope. There are grassroots movements and community organisations such as ourselves and others in the UK that have been tirelessly advocating for change. More specific organisations include Black Lives Matter UK, Inquest, and the Forefront Project that have all been at the forefront of pushing for reforms in policing, sentencing, and prison conditions. They're advocating for what some call Black abolitionism, a push for decarceration and community-based alternatives to traditional punitive measures. Community-led solutions like restorative justice programs, mentoring for at-risk youth, initiatives that provide support for families affected by incarceration are making a difference. These solutions focus on healing rather than punishment and emphasize the importance of addressing the root causes of crime, like poverty, lack of opportunity, and systemic racism. So, with all that said, what can we do? It starts with raising awareness and continuing these conversations within our communities. But it doesn't stop there. We need to engage in policy advocacy, support grassroots organisations that are doing the work, and educate ourselves and others about these systemic issues. We need to ask ourselves, what kind of society do we want to live in? And what are we willing to do to achieve it?